Hello, I'm Hebby, and we just made an army of Eevee evolutions, which you can make too, since the patterns are up on my Patreon to download. And in that video I asked people to talk to me about some Pokemons they might like to see, and I might factor that into what I was going to do in the future, in this same kind of beginner-friendly and cute style. And then I was like, well, how could I have started with Eevees? Where's that little rat they've got on all the Pokemon product marketing? And so I had to do Pikachu before listening to anyone else's polite requests. Just so you know, I was practically possessed to make these. I have no explanation except for a brief spurt of rat madness. These are an ideal blunt projectile for inspiring fear in your enemies or getting them to pay you back money that they owe you, because they squeak and are full of beans. Max strike damage with an intimidating cry. Alright. Block! Round two! You got her in half! Whee! It's like a massacre. You can download the pattern for free, it's linked in the description. And beat the snot out of the people unfortunate enough to be within approximate airstrike range. I still have a bajillion squeakers, so I'm just gonna keep putting them in random things. These plushies, in my opinion, are great for beginners and are super fun to make. This does require applique though. But you'll get through it. It's time to begin with tracing and cutting out our pattern. There are points on the tail and the ears where you fold down the marked line. That's so you can draw out the colour change. You'll also notice there's stripe lines cut into the body side pieces. That's so you can get Pikachu's little back stripes even on both halves. Add a seam allowance of your choice onto all of the pieces except for the head sides, forehead, and chin. I don't personally add seam allowance to pieces I sew by hand, but that's a matter of personal preference, I suppose. I add an extra large seam allowance to the chest so it forgives being a little wonky though. And now it's time to sew. We're starting with the ears. Pikachu's ear tips are black, or like very dark grey. This requires sewing down our colour change with applique. To recap, applique is a sewing technique where you layer fabric over itself, basically. We're slicing off the excess where it meets our stitches, making sure not to cut those, and then folding it up like it's a sandwich, and lining up the black portions with each other, before sewing all the way around the shape on the outside. Cut your ears out of their prison and then invert them. Now you can see how the black tip colour change works. Now for the body, since that also includes more applique. Take the body side pieces and lay a big chunk of the fabric you're going to use for the stripe colours over the area where they're drawn. As you sew down the stripes on the machine, keep in mind not to overshoot your seam allowance, because then there will be a hole in the colour change's design. It doesn't matter how much seam allowance you add because once they're sewn up, we will snip it all off except the area within the stripes. They're sewn up individually on both halves, even though that makes it a little bit more tricky when lining up the body pieces. Because the body sides are not perfectly even, they can't be replaced with a flat slice of fabric. They're meant to be 3D, so we can't simply applique the stripes in one over the whole body. Once the stripe patterning is sewn up on both sides, we're ready to join them together. Lay your body side pieces out with the fluffy portions facing inward to each other, and sew from the nape of the neck all the way down to the butt. And then, open up the body halves, which are now together, and align them with the chest piece. Make sure all the feet reach out into the correct corners, and then sew down each half of the body, leaving a little bit of a gap in the neck/shoulder area so that eventually you can turn it inside out. Or right side out, whatever. Go slowly around the paws because crimping or shifting in the fabric is more obvious at the feet areas. Do this on both sides and then cut out the seam allowance of the body. Slice it nice and close, but don't overdo it of course, or your plush will have holes. Now turn the body right side out and add the beans. I use polyfill pellets, but as I said last time, you can use craft beads like pony beads or glass pellets. Now I'm inserting the evil demon soul, also known as the squeaker, as well as stuffing the body lightly to lift up the body and bulk up the back. Now it's time for the tail. There is a colour change in the tail base, which we use the same technique to create as the ears. And yeah, it is the tail base, not the tip of the tail. I remember this personally because at 12 my parents and I were making a Pikachu hoodie for me. I know they're commercially available, but my parents wouldn't let me have it unless I could make it myself. But I remember messing up the tail nearly completely because I totally forgot where that color change was. It's a fairly popular example of the Mandela effect where people misremember history, but it's actually not entirely false. Even though it's not a conspiracy, there are actually Pikachu merch and designs with a black tail. Although, even without those, Pikachu has black-tipped ears and a brown base of the tail, so it sort of merges in your brain into being the tip. Although, if I'm being honest, I don't know how I made the mistake at 12 since I was way too into the Pokemon anime at the time, and Pikachu's tail in that is definitely not black. Anyways, this Pikachu I'm making is a male, but of course you can make your Pikachu female by using the tail, which is shaped like a love heart, as you can see here. Once again, this is another Pokemon with a tail-based gender difference. However, there are a lot more female Pikachu plush out there, available in stores, so I don't feel as ripped off compared to the female Eevee plush which I've been denied. I'm making the shiny Pikachu female because I actually have a shiny female Pikachu on Pokemon Go whose name is Peppachu, which is pretty cool to me. Anyways, once that tail is stuffed, it's time for the head. We start at the chin and sew it to the divot at the bottom of the head side pieces and follow along until we run out of plush to sew. Then we do the same on the other side. We grab our forehead piece and attach it to the center of the nose and then work back to where this piece meets the chin fabric. Let the excess fabric hang off the back of the head. We're going to fold it inside of the plush when we stuff it. And then we're going to turn it right side out and do just that. Take your stuffing and push a ball of it into Pikachu's nose to keep that full, and then plump up those big cheeks. No mercy during the stuffing process. Stuff hard and violent. Once you've shown this rat who's boss, you've got to seal up the back of Pikachu's skull with a ladder stitch. Go over this seam multiple times and then attach the face. I use a thick black embroidery thread to make Pikachu's nose by first going through his eye, out of the nose area and then back in, angling the needle out through the nose once again, and pulling the thread into a triangle, and then leading it out the other eye and tying off a knot. And then it's done. Sorta hard to explain that one. But now it's time to sew down the cheeks by hand using applique once again. Don't worry, this is the last time, it's okay. I do this by hand to hide the stitches better. Oh, and attach the ears. Fold and pin them down in whatever pose you'd like. It is sort of weird to me that these are movable, but they are ears, I guess. When I do the eyes in specific, I sew around the outsides and then pass the needle through the inside of the plushie at the bridge of the nose area and pull the thread taut between the eyes in order to tilt them in a cute way, hopefully. This also pops out the nose and completes the look. Now it's time for attaching the body parts. We'll start with the tail since it's just sitting here, I guess. This is why it's good to pad out the butt and back with stuffing. It's a lot easier to sew and makes the shape less pancake-ish. And now for the head. Oh, and sew up that open neck hole. It's important. I use a ladder stitch for this process and go over the seams 2 or more times, since we don't want his head to come off. And then they're done! Pikachu is a 3 out of 5 for difficulty, although these are all still great for beginners. Pikachu does have some applique details you need to line up across both halves of the body, and a few pieces are difficult to turn right side out. Good luck with the tail. Regardless, I recommend. Pikachu is the best and yellowest electric rat that the Pokemon franchise has released, although they have released a lot. Just so many. Oh, and feel free to put the black tip on Pikachu's tail and live your fantasy, or make some of the special Pikas which actually have it in canon. I'd love to see it if you made a princess or something. Speaking of different looking Pikachus, do you see one in the room with us? I really do like the dark yellow verging on orange colour, but it's not super distinct from their regular form. It would be cool to me if Raichu and Pikachu's colour palettes were swapped for their respective shinies, with Raichu being yellow and Pikachu being orange. I don't know what happens to Pichu in this scenario. They can get a nuclear bomb dropped in them and go green, I guess. Seems to be the fashion. Anyways, that's my suggestion. Put me on the team! Have fun making these plushies, and thank you to my Patreon members for supporting me making these plush and patterns. I just wanted to share the few clips I got of Supernova, one of, if not the largest conventions in Queensland, which happens annually in Brisbane during November time. I went with my best friend and fellow artist Racharu, and if I saw you there, hello! And additionally, thank you for the fan art, they take up prime positions on my wall. And also the birthday gift of Mini Calamity. I brought my Army of the Damned. Evolutions, as well as Wings of Fire plushies and some of my other art and drawings. It was nice talking to so many people. 3 days for a con though, I was dead by the end of it. Basically flatlining. Between that and exams, I tapped out the entirety of late October to early November. But I'm back now, my pulse is returning.